Welcome to Rustler's Reminiscence, stories of hope, faith, and frontier courage. Let the journey unfold. I used to think a man could pound his past flat on an anvil if he just swung long enough. In Rusted Gulch I tried it daily, burning the bellows from pink dawn to blue dark, letting iron take the blame for roads I won't name in a church. My name is Ezekiel Rowan Zeke, if you ain't the law. I bought a squat forge at the edge of town and hid in its smoke, trying to live quiet with my head down and my hands black. The morning it cracked open, a dun pony limped up my lane with a boy on top wearing dust like a second skin. He slid down stiff-kneed, wrestled a government bag from his shoulder, and held out a creased envelope like hot iron. San Jacinto was stamped on the flap. I scraped scale from my palms and broke the seal. The words were plain as fence rails. My kid brother, Cass, was dead. Trestle gave way in a storm. 2 men fell. 1 body found. They were sorry to inform the shop got small. Heat pushed at my back. The quench barrel hissed. I read the letter twice without breathing, and a third time with breath like a rasp. Cass had a laugh that could sand the burrs off a bad day. He was the better part of whatever good I carried. I pictured him barefoot in Rowan Creek, trousers, rolled, slinging water at me, and the memory turned cruel as a door swinging shut. "There's another, Mr. Rowan," the boy said, fishing deeper in the bag. I signed his ledger with a hand that didn't feel like mine, and opened Caldwell Bank and Trust on the anvil. Tidy script spoke of arrears, foreclosure, and a lien on Rowan Creek to satisfy obligation. That creek raided through our pasture like a silver rope, and through town like grace. Out here you don't measure life in months. You measure it in water. The bank's math said we were short, so they'd put numbers where our river ran. Grief hits like a hammer, face flat and heavy, and leaves a ringing where bad ideas like to speak. Mine had a smooth, familiar voice. Sell the forge or run, pick up an old road and trade one debt for another, fold a hand of sins and call it even. I stepped outside and pressed my forehead to the anvil the way a tired man leans on a bar. Pine, smoke lifted sweet from the slack tub. I swatted a fly and felt my jaw locked hard enough to crack a tooth. Running would be easy. I'd done it before, but easy never paid a debt. I folded both letters and slid them into my vest like they might burn through if I let them breathe. The boy hovered, waiting for words to carry back. "Tell San Jacinto I heard," I said. "Tell the bank they'll see me soon enough." He dwindled into the white light, leaving me with the old itch under my skin and a choice I couldn't pawn off on steel. I doused the coals, barred the door, saddled my mule, Judah. "Just the ranch," I told him. "The sky. Just to set things right." I checked my colt, then set it back. Biscuits, salt, a canteen, Ma's photograph into the sack. By noon I was riding for the homestead, the town's noise falling behind while cottonwoods talked low ahead. I touched the letters in my vest, 2 small hearts meeting wrong against my ribs, and turned my face toward Rowan Creek, where every reckoning begins. Rowan Creek whispered before it showed. The homestead sagged fence slouched, windmill tired. I swung down where we once ran barefoot. The house kept quiet. Mara met me on the porch. Grief had pared her down hair in a pale kerchief. "Little." Liddy peered from her skirt, chewing one finger and worrying Ma's brass locket. "Zeke," Mara said. She handed me a paper-cut square as a wound. "Bank rode out. They want your countersign." Inside, the parlor was half empty and hushed. Cass's boots were gone. The checkerboard he carved lay face down in dust. I spread the deed. Caldwell's script, honey over thorn. Sign and debts are settled condition on transfer of run. Creek water rights to develop a spur line. Sheriff Crow brought it, Mara said. Called it mercy, said the railroad would see us square. She wrung her apron. If I helped persuade you, he'd see Liddy sent east. I knelt to Liddy. You like school? She shook her head, gaze pinned to the locket. Me neither. I said, Where's Crow? Town, Mara said. Waiting on your dust. Then she met my eyes' accusation and plea, braided together. I can't lose this place, Zeke. I can't fight men who write laws on our river and call it fair. Back on the porch, the creek flashed between cottonwoods. You sign that, and all this worry floats downstream, a voice drawled. Sheriff Abner Crow leaned on the rail. Afternoon, Sheriff, I said. You ride out often to watch widows. Sign? I ride to keep order, he said, smiling without heat. The railroad brings money, jobs. This paper is the bridge between drowning and dry ground. He tapped the margin. Sign and I forget 1,000 whispers about who you were. Don't, and I remember posters. My past was a dog he liked to whistle for. The creek isn't. Mine to sell, I said, nor yours to gift. Everything's someone's to sell, he answered. By nightfall it's the railroad's, with or without your flourish. I prefer clean hands. He held a pen like a preacher offers communion. Mara stood in the doorway. Liddy clung to her skirt. Zeke? She asked. The pen waited, promising. A piece that would salt the earth. Ma set 10 cups on this rail and said, Drink polite, boys, the river's a guest that keeps us alive. I felt that guest watching. I handed Crow the deed back without my mark. I won't sign, I said. Tell Caldwell I'll settle what we owe without selling the vein that holds this town together. I'll see him tomorrow with his ledger open. Crow's eyes narrowed. He slid the paper into his coat. Careful you don't choke on your honor. He tipped his hat to Mara and the child, then swung into the saddle. Dust rose and settled like a verdict. Mara's shoulders fell. What will you do? I didn't own a map, just a compass made of shame and promise. Work, I said, and look. There's always a leak in a rich man's bucket. I touched the locket at Liddy's throat, felt the square edges inside, and knew it hid more than a picture. We'll keep the river where it belongs. That night I lay on the porch, listening to the creek talk to the dark, counting debts instead of stars. I had refused drowning. Morning would ask for more than refusal. By mid-morning, Main Street drew tight as a cinch. The stagecoach wobbled in with canvas ripped, a lamp dangling, the guard's sleeve tied off above blood. The driver croaked one word, payroll. Sheriff Abner Crow arrived strolling, hat low, eyes bright. 2 questions, then he turned so all could hear. 3 riders, bandanas, near the dry arroyo. 1 led a swayback mule. 1 wore, this is rich, a blacksmith's apron. Heads pivoted. I stood at Benno's livery with a rasp in my fist. I was here, I said. Benno grunted assent. Crow smiled like a joke he loved too much. Zeke Rowan and Easy Money were friends, he said. Maybe they kept in touch. His gaze touched my hammer, my apron, my face. I could lock you up on suspicion. Or you sign Caldwell's paper, transfer Rowan Creek to the railroad, the bank wipes your slate, and this evaporates. Boots studied dust. I thought of Mara, of Liddy's locket, of Ma saying the river is a guest. No, I said. I won't sell water to buy your mercy. Crow's smile died. Then by the clock, sundown, prove where the money went, or I'd take Mr. Rowan in. The words nailed themselves to the day. Benno slid the rasp from my hand. He'll hang you with your own horseshoes, he muttered. What now? Find the seam where the lye leaks. I stripped the apron, rinsed my face in the trough, and walked south. 2 miles out, the road told a story. Coach tracks swerving, cartridge brass in the grit, a mule print with a long crack in the left hind fresh and theatrical. Judah's hoof had no such flaw. Someone painted with my colors. I cut toward the arroyo. Mesquite scraped my sleeves. Railroad survey stakes stuck up like teeth. August heat hammered everything flat, yet a thread of cool ran the air. I heard what shouldn't be water. Not much, just enough to make willows flash green where the map promised none. I filed it away. Sundown pushed at my back. I jogged for town, planning words. The bank's clock read 3 when I faced Caldwell across his polished desk. He measured me over thick lenses. "Sheriff says you're due in a cell," he said. "I'm due a day." "Open your books. Who knew the payroll schedule? Who took railroad advances? Give me daylight and I'll bring you names." He weighed reputation against arithmetic. "Sunset," he said at last. "Not later." Outside, Crow leaned on a post, pleased with his own echo. "Tick-tock," he breathed. I crossed to the church and let its bell settle me. Not praying, counting. By 4 I'd posted for Deacon Merritt and 2 ranchers who still believed a man could change. By 5 I had a rough map, a coil of rope, and a notion that hurt my teeth. If someone used my name for that robbery, they wanted me busy denying it while they moved the prize. "Follow water," my father said. "Iron tells where heat went. Water tells who took it." Sundown lowered its red lip. I checked Judah's cinch, patted his neck, and looked once at Rowan Creek sliding between cottonwoods. "Hold fast," I told it. Then I swung up and rode for the place the driver named, with an hour's worth of hope in a glass that wasn't mine. The arroyo the driver named ran like an old scar across the flats. Judah picked along the bed while sunset bled through dust. I rode in cottonwood shade until the trees thinned and only survey laths kept me company numbers hammered by men who think lines can bully a river. Heat should have left the mouth dry, yet a sound threaded the stillness that didn't belong. Water talking low. Not Rowan Creek's open chatter, something hushed. I tied Judah and followed on foot, dotted a tangle of willow roots the sand gave under my boot, and came up wet. Brush hit a plank face fresh sawn, tarred, cribbing set tight. A culvert crouched there, greased black and lined with river stone, leading Rowan Creek sideways toward the rail camp like a butcher's tray tipped to catch drippings. I set my ear to the wood. The creek hurried where it shouldn't, throttled by an iron gate and hand wheel. The wheel wore new wrench scars. A lantern soot print smudged the plank. Whoever built this did it quick and quiet, then dressed the wound so the land wouldn't. Show stitches dot beside the culvert sat a crate under burlap stenciled tools with a railroad mark. I pried it with my knife, expecting wrenches. The top layer obliged. Beneath, wrapped in oiled cloth, lay a ledger tied with twine and smelling of vault air. The script inside marched like soldiers. Dates, amounts, initials. Payouts for diversion. Works, security, indemnity. 2 marks kept repeating. A C and CR. My stomach turned a slow circle. A C could only be Abner Crow. CR, I told myself, belonged to some Caldwell clerk until a signature unfurled across a receipt like a snake warming. Cass Rowan. Date. 3 days after the letter swore him dead. The arroyo tilted under me. If he signed this, he wasn't in the river when they said, or he was, and somebody rode his name like a stolen horse. I didn't know which hurt worse. A pressed blue flax petal fell from the gutter Mara used to keep a jar of those. I tucked it back, not ready to show the day what I'd learned. Dot at the bottom where totals gather. A note in careful hand waited. Upon transfer of Rowan Creek rights, balance due to Sheriff Abner Crow for services rendered. The sum could float a church. He wasn't whistling posters for fun. He was damning my past and charging toll for the bridge over it. I wrapped the ledger and slid it under Ma's photograph in my vest. I should have ridden straight to the rail camp and kicked the nest, but gunfire scatters truth. I spun the hand wheel. A quarter turn enough to starve the pipe without raising a scream, and brushed out my boot sign. Judah flicked an ear when I mounted. Sundown's waiting, I told him. The bank would have lamps lit and a pen eager. I'd bring my own ink, the kind that stains without paper. I carry irons in my trade, cuffs I forged for a Texas marshal who never paid. They rode in my saddlebag, like a promise. Tonight they'd fit a sheriff's wrists if the law proved narrower than a ledger. I pointed Judah toward town, the creek's secret tugging at my back to go speak the truth out loud. The square wore the last light like brass. Folks drifted out to cool their tongues on gossip. I came in from the south road with a ledger heavy as iron and a prayer I didn't know. Hoofbeats rolled from the ridge 3 dusters with rifles, and behind them a fourth in a white hat new as a christening. He rode loose, grinning like the town belonged to M. Cass. My teeth didn't sit right. Money had cleaned his edges and cooled his eyes. Women crossed themselves, boys gawped. Mara stepped from Benno's shade with Liddy clamped to her skirt. Cass tipped his hat. "Brother," he said like it cost him nothing. "Heard you've been spending my name." I walked until I could smell his horse. "I read your hand in a ledger that steals our river," I said, loud enough for the barber shop. "I read payouts to a sheriff who sells law by the pound." He laughed soft. "You always did paint thunder?" "I died on paper to keep Mara safe and the bank patient. I made a deal to float us all while you hammered horseshoes and called it redemption." Mara's chin trembled. "Cass, you told me I'd fix it." He smoothed Liddy's hair, then raised his voice. "What Zeke forgets to mention is the payroll that went missing this morning. Last time he rode for money, men bled. I figure a wolf doesn't change because he moved to town." Crow leaned on a post, pleased to let someone else carry his tune. "I was showing a gray at Benno's when the coach limped in," I said. "But I touched this." I lifted the ledger so lamplight kissed the leather. "It's got your signature, and numbers that turn Rowan Creek into steam you can sell by the cup." Cass's smile thinned. "Building takes money. A spur brings buyers. We sell a little water now to buy a future. That's arithmetic. Selling the vein to buy a heartbeat," I said. "That's a grave measured with a ruler." Rifle bolts clicked among the dusters. Crow's gaze drifted to Mara and the child. "Rowan talk belongs at a table, not in the street," he drawled. "Church," I said before Cass could steer it. 1 hour. Bring your papers, I'll bring mine. Bring the men who swear they know you. We'll open everything beneath that. Roof and let the town hear it whole." Cass hated pews. He looked to Crow. Crow made the smallest shrug a snake ever managed. Cass wiped his mouth and nodded. 1 hour. I slid the ledger back under my coat. Mara caught my sleeve. "Is it you?" She whispered, meaning the robbery, meaning the ruin. It was me. I said, meaning the man I'd been and the man I refused to be. "Come to the church. Bring Liddy. Bring whatever truth you hid to survive." The bell hadn't rung yet, but I could hear it gathering breath. Towns have a way of squaring their shoulders all at once. The light left the steeple, and the square went the color of pew wood. For the first time since the letters came, I felt us walking toward something that might not be a gallows. The church smelled of lamp oil and pine pitch, and the heat of so many bodies made the boards sweat. Lanterns swung slow as breathing. I stood under Ma's stitchwork banner, Suffer the Little Children, like a man daring heaven, to be specific. Deacon Merritt nodded for me to speak. My mouth felt full of filings. I'm Ezekiel Rowan, I said, as if they didn't all know. I rode wrong roads. I held men at gunpoint for money I didn't earn. I ran when the running was easy. I came here to hammer that past flat. The pews shifted, some pity, some disgust, a few eyes brave enough to keep looking. I didn't touch the payroll. My hands are dirty enough without borrowing fresh stain. Crow lounged along the aisle, the kind of relaxed you get when you think the game is rigged. Cass leaned against a post near the back, hat in hand, eyes skipping across faces looking for allies he hadn't paid yet. Mara rose before my courage could sit down. Sheriff Crow came to me after Cass's accident, she said, voice thin but steady. He said the bank could forgive if we signed the water. He said if I didn't help get Zeke to agree, he had papers to send Liddy to schooling. Back east. The word schooling fell like a shovel hitting rock. She cupped Liddy's head. I asked Cass. He said it was temporary. He said the railroad would fix everything. A low murmur built, a hive waking. Crow smiled like a man watching a fire. He started catch the neighbor's shed. You threaten a child, Benno growled from the third pew. You quit being law. Cass pushed off the post. I kept us above water, he snapped. Zeke kept a ledger you never saw. He's good at speeches when the work is done by other hands. I pulled the ledger out where everyone could see it. This book says you took advances to turn a river sideways, I said, then looked at the deacon. I can't outshoot what rides with these two, but iron can turn a wheel. There's a culvert under willow roots by the survey stakes, built quick and quiet. If we close its throat at midnight, their camp dries up. They'll come with the pay chest and the papers to open it again. We make them fetch their own rope. Crow's jaw tightened. Only a man who knows the road can describe its potholes. Or you're lying, he said lightly. Or you plan another robbery in the dark and hope a church forgives you. Then we give the dark a lantern, I answered. Deacon, station men in the cottonwoods. Mrs. Pike, take the women. Children to the vestry and bolt the door, no heroes. Benno, you and Harlow watch the south approach. Nobody fires unless Crow aims first or a child's in danger. Deacon weighed me like iron fresh from quench. God doesn't ask us to be foolish, he said, but he does ask us to stand where truth needs a back. He turned to the room. Hands if you'll help. Palms climbed like prairie grass. I set the ledger on the pulpit and opened my palm. One more thing. Crow thinks in numbers and Cass counts fast. We need proof that survives their mouths. I slid a knife under the leather hinge, lifted it neat, and showed a thin cavity where spine met board. I'll doctor this cover. Pack it with bills we mark with the church seal. When Crow grabs it, he'll open it to check, and the false spine will spring. Money will spill where every eye can say it fell. We pick it up piece by piece and put names to it. Horsehide. Glue, Benno said. I got a tin. Flour paste, Mrs. Pike added. Sets in a minute. Cass's smile broke it slick. You always were a showman, Zeke. I learned it from watching your shade, I said. Midnight at the culvert. You bring your truth. I'll bring mine. No guns if you keep your hands where folks can see them. Crow tipped his hat like the gentleman he rented. Midnight, he said. And if water runs where you say, I'll thank you for fixing the railroad's pipe. His eyes told me the thanks would come at the end of a rope. Lanterns guttered as we filed out. I caught Mara's hand on the steps. I will not let him take Liddy, I said. She nodded once, grief hard as glass, fear rattling inside it. Back at the forge I worked fast. Slit, hinge, paste, a narrow spring from a broken trap. Church seal pressed into a handful of notes. Deacon said the choir wouldn't miss till Sunday. I slid the trap into the spine and shut the cover. It looked like any book that keeps quiet until the right hands make it talk. Near midnight, the wind leaned into the cottonwoods and the creek, whispered as if it knew where we were going. I buckled my gun belt and wished I didn't need it. Hold, and be better than me, I whispered to the river's dark. Then I stepped into it, one man with a ledger full of teeth, walking toward a gate I meant to close on a lie. Cottonwoods kept our breath. Deacon crouched to my left with a shotgun he only used on rattlers and men who asked for it. Benno and Harlow ghosted farther down, boots wrapped in rags. I slid into the willow tangle and laid a palm on the culvert. Wheel, iron bit my skin. One hard turn, and the pipe's throat cinched shut. The creek above us quickened, as if glad to keep its own name. Hooves, muffled curses. Lantern light jittered on canvas and gun needle. Crow rode in with 2 hirelings and a mule hauling a squat pay chest. Cass came behind, clean-shirted and irritated, like a man late to supper. Pipes dry, one gun muttered, kicking at the cribbing. Camp's near riot. Crow dropped from the saddle, crouched, and set his ear to the plank just as I had. "There's water," he said. "Somebody's throttled it." He looked at Cass. "Your brother's got long fingers." I stepped out with the ledger under my arm. Deacon rose with me. Shadows on both banks stood up and became townsfolk. "Long enough to close a theft," I said. "Short enough not to reach Mara's kitchen without knocking." Cass's eyes flickered to the willows, weighing rifles he could not see. "You think a Sunday crowd scares me, Zeke? I'm betting proof does." I laid the book on the handwheel housing. "You want your camp smoothed by morning, Sheriff? Open the pipe. Bring the chest. We'll count the bills that bought this mouth and the names that spent them." Crow's mouth curved. He made a small gesture. Steel rasped as his men loosened straps. "I brought the chest," he said lightly. "As for names, payroll doesn't teach letters." Brush cracked behind me. A small shape stumbled into lantern light Liddy, hair out of its ribbon, breath hitching. Mara rushed after, snared by fear and branches. She had followed, then lost the trail, then found us at the worst second. A child can find the world. Crow moved quicker than shame. He caught Liddy by the elbow and swung her in front of him, gun crooked along her braid, smile flat and empty. "Truth needs a back, Deacon," he said. "It don't need a target." The night pulled tight. I raised my hands. "Let the girl go," I said. "You can keep every card in your pocket and still walk away breathing. Don't put a child between you and the town that feeds you." Cass's jaw worked. He didn't like the picture either, but he liked being cornered less. "Put the ledger down," he said. "Back off the wheel." I set the book gently on the chest. "You want it?" I asked Crow. "It's what you rode for." My voice sounded calm from far off, like it belonged to some man who never missed when a shot mattered. He edged forward with Liddy, free hand. "Stretching, slow," he said. "We don't want anything snapping but your pride." "Watch the spine," I said. He flipped the cover one-handed. The little spring I'd hidden bit like a snake. The false hinge popped, and a rain of notes, each stamped with a church seal, burst into the air and pattered into the shallow run at our feet, fluttering bright with wet. Lantern light struck the seal, and a dozen throats made one sound. Benno shouted, "Marked," and waded in, palms open. Harlow followed. Deacon stepped forward, barrel steady, voice like winter. "Release the child. Chaos has a temperature. This one ran cold." Crow jerked back in reflex as wet bills slapped his boots, and in that breath Liddy twisted like a cat and dropped. Mara lunged and caught her, rolling them both into the reeds. Cass drew, but I was already moving not for his gun, but for the culvert wheel. I spun it half a turn. The gate yawned and the creek surged, slapping the notes against Crow's shins, plastering guilt to him like leaves. "Hands!" I shouted. "Hands up!" The cottonwoods answered with the soft rack of hammers being cocked, but not yet fired. Cass froze, tilted between blood and sense. Crow raised his pistol anyway, going for one last bargain, and that's when Deacon took a step that made every other step decide what it was made of. "No more children," he said, and laid the bead. Center of Crow's hatband. Crow saw the math and lost. His gun drooped, his hands went up. Benno splashed forward with rawhide. I pulled the iron cuffs from my saddlebag and closed them on wrists that had signed too much. Harlow kicked the chest, opened full stacks, tallies, a packet of receipts with initials we already knew. Cass watched me fit the second cuff on him, and for a heartbeat his old grin tried to save him. It couldn't find purchase. I leaned close. "You tell the judge you did it to keep Mara safe," I whispered. "You tell him you sold the creek to buy our souls clean. He'll ask about the part where you let a gun touch a child's hair." He flinched like I'd struck him. Around us, townsfolk lifted notes from water and laid them on a canvas spread, the church seal shining like a line drawn under a sum that finally added honest. Mara held Liddy against her dress and shook, then squared herself and stared Crow. Down the way women do when they've decided a story's done, using their fear for kindling. We trust the hirelings. Deacon read each receipt into the air like scripture until the night knew our account. Above us the wind turned a page. "At dawn," he said, "we ride for a judge." I closed the gate back to how I'd found it, proof preserved, not vengeance, and we hauled the chest, the ledger's sprung cover, and 3 small men back toward town. The creek ran easy beside us, washing the last of the glue from the spine with a sound that could have been laughter if a river were mean. Dawn painted the steeple a thin gold and left the rest of town the color of old paper. We tied Crow and Cass with harness leather on the church steps while the deacon rang the bell like a summons. By the time the dust settled, a circuit judge rode in from the east road with a clerk, saddlebags fat with forms, and a face that had seen men try every door out of a room with only one. We set the chest on the porch, spread the wet, stamped bills to dry, and opened the ledger where the spine had sprung. Liddy stood tucked under Mara's hand, hair damp with dew. She had been brave in the dark, the brave get tired later. She worried her brass locket until the chain left a red necklace on her neck. "What's in there, Bird?" I asked. "A picture," she said, then frowned. "And a bump." Mara eased the clasp. Inside, the little frame flipped, and there, nested behind a curl of hair, rested a brass key the size of a thumbnail. I felt something old stir. Ma's hands were small. She liked puzzles that looked like prayers. I took the key from Liddy's palm and set it to the ledger's real spine. Not the trap I'd built, but the bookbinder's seam. It turned with a sound soft as a sigh. A hidden slot opened along the backboard, and a ribboned packet slid free. Deacon handed it to the judge. The top page was Ma's handwriting, the looped R I'd watched her teach Cass on a rainy day. "To be opened by my sons together," it began, "or by the people if they cannot act as one." The judge read on while the town held its breath. Years back, before Pa died, Ma had recorded and notarized a gift, Rowan Creek, its springs and its traditional ditches, conveyed in trust to the people of Rusted Gulch in perpetuity. Stewardship to pass to an elected board, when and only when both. Her sons proved by conduct they would guard what guarded them. Until then, Caldwell Bank to hold the deed as trustee for the town, not as owner. The papers carried seals, dates, and the tidy signatures of witnesses now gone to their rest. I felt my feet forget the earth. We'd been fighting over something that had never been ours to sell. Ma had measured us and found us short, then had tied a knot the railroads and sheriffs could not pull unless we untied it for them. I looked at Cass. His face went slack, then tight, then blank. He'd tried to buy a future with someone else's water, and found out our mother had already. Paid for forever. The judge cleared his throat. "Sheriff Crow," he said, "you diverted trust water for private gain, extorted a widow, and conspired to obstruct justice. Mr. Cass Rowan, you did likewise and feigned death to aid it." He tapped the receipts with 2 fingers. "Your names signed you. The church seal, and these witnesses will keep the signatures from wriggling." Crow tried charm, then anger. Both slid off the page. Cass looked to Mara, the one person who might catch a plea. She opened her mouth, shut it, then spoke the smallest, hardest prayer I ever heard. "Liddy is not a key," she said. "She is a child." I told the judge what I had been and what I had done to stop being it. I listed robberies like a ledger burned into a man's ribs. I asked to pay for those days plain, with work or time, not with anyone else's water. Then I asked him to seat the town as rightful keepers of Rowan Creek, according to Ma's deed and God's sense. He did. He named an interim board before noon deacon, Mrs. Pike, Benno, and 2 farmers who can tell by the sound when a ditch as losing heart. Caldwell's man shuffled, blanched, then produced the trustee's stamp like a stage prop and pressed it where the judge pointed. Papers changed color without moving. Sometimes law is just ink that remembers who it belongs to. Crow. And the hirelings rode to prison with the judge's clerk tallying every step. Cass rode with him, hands quiet in my cuffs. As he passed me, he found some piece of the boy I'd taught to swim. "You always were better at losing," he said, trying for the old grin. I shook my head. "Ma was," I answered. She gave away the one thing we kept trying to steal. Afternoon found me back at the forge, doors open, river breeze slipping past the anvil like a pardoned sinner. Mara brought Liddy by with warm bread and a silence we let be mercy. The new water board posted a notice on the cottonwood, diverted flows forbiddens. Ditch days to be chosen by lottery. Fines payable in labor on the head gate. I offered to build a lock for the culvert gate and to shoe the town's teams for free until harvest. When the first bolt slid home on the new lock, the creek sounded. Pleased but not surprised. It had known Ma longer than I had. Toward evening I walked to the churchyard. The bell rope trailed down like an old friend's sleeve. I put a hand to the wood where the ledger had first learned to speak, and thanked it for breaking in the right hands. Then I thanked Ma out loud for seeing 2 boys clearly and trusting the town more than either of us deserved. I told her I wasn't running anymore. I told her I'd pay what I owed. The boards warmed under my palm like iron finding temper. A man can't pound his past flat, I learned, but he can bend it to hold something useful. Tomorrow I'll shoe Benno's gray, then walk with the board to the creek and set stones where the bank is tender. We'll count turns on the gate out loud, so no one forgets what water costs to keep. When I sleep, I'll hear the river talking in its own house again. It won't be mine, and that's the best part. It will be ours in perpetuity, Ma's. Word not mine, and I will finally deserve a little of the quiet I tried to buy with smoke and steel. Thanks for riding with us through another tale from the Old West. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. More adventures are waiting on the trail ahead. See you next time.